Let us begin by reading the word problem out loud. A new supplier of sporting goods is $96 million behind the leader in annual sales. 1 year later, the same new supplier trails the same leader by $28 million in annual sales. How many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year? Let us begin our strategy for problem solving by analyzing the problem. Again, the first thing you want to do when analyzing the problem is you want to identify the question that's being asked. In this problem, we're asked, how many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year? So that's the question being asked, so that's what we want to find. So now that we know exactly what it is we're looking for, let us go ahead and jump to step 2 and assign a variable. Since the question asked how many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year, we're going to choose our variable to represent the same thing. So we'll go ahead and use the letter x, and we'll let x equal the amount of millions of dollars that the new supplier increased its annual sales by in 1 year. So again, our assignment of the variable is basically the question only reworded in the form of a statement. So that's the only difference. So now that we've done step 2, let us go back to analyzing the problem. So what other information do we know? Well, we know that a new supplier of sporting goods is $96 million behind the leader in annual sales. So they're behind. That's going to be the key word here, behind, and they're behind by 96 million. Behind is an indicator of subtraction, so we're going to go ahead and keep that in mind. Let's see, what else do we know? 1 year later, the same new supplier trails the same leader by $28 million in annual sales. Okay, so again, we have a keyword being trails, and the numerical value is $28 million. So trails is, again, another indicator of subtraction. Whenever you're trailing something, you're behind, just like the previous word that was highlighted, and therefore they're both indicators of subtraction or negativity. And then we're going to see how they play out when we create the equation. So there we go. We've analyzed the problem. Now let's go ahead and try to create an equation from this. So what do we know? So I'm going to go ahead and draw a scale. So ideally I want to draw a vertical number line where that's going to be the value 0. So going up, values are going to increase and get positive, and going down, values are going to get more and more negative. So this is 0, and we'll go ahead and go by 25s. So I'm going to label this one negative 25. I'll label this negative 50. Negative 75, negative 100, and negative 125. So there we go. That's going to be our number line. And now what we know is that to begin with, the new supplier is $96 million behind the leader in annual sales. So 96 million behind. So again, behind is negative. So we're going to go from 0 all the way down to 96. So just shy of the 100 tick mark. So there we go. So this represents 96. There we go, negative 96. And we know that 1 year later, the same new supplier trails the same leader by 28 million in annual sales. So now we're only trailing by 28 million, but again, it's still negative because the keyword is being trailing. So we'll start off at 0. Now we're going to go slightly past the negative 25 mark. And this is going to be negative 28. Again, it's negative because we're trailing. So there we go. So there we have our two values plotted. And what we want to know is how much did this new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year. So it started off at negative 96. This is where it started off, negative 96. And then it was able to increase its sales to the point where now it's only behind by negative 28. So what we want to know is, what is this difference right here? What is this? And then again, since we don't know it, and X represents the amount of millions of dollars that the new supplier increases annual sales by in 1 year, this quantity is going to be X. So let's go ahead and create our equation. So again, we're going to start off with negative 96. That's what the original quantity was when he was behind the leader in annual sales. Negative 96 million. And what we know is that the sporting goods store or supplier, it made an increase in sales. So we're going to have to add to that certain quantity that's represented by a variable X. And then once these annual sales happened over that 1 year, that now put the supplier only 28 behind, or trailing by 28 million. So there we go. That's going to go ahead and be our equation. So now let us go ahead and solve the equation. Again, when solving the equation, you always want to start off with the original equation found in step 3. So we'll have negative 96 plus X equals negative 28. So again, we always want to get the variable X completely by itself. The problem right now is that we're adding negative 96 to it. Since we want to do the addition of negative 96, we could just simply add the opposite sign. And in which case, the opposite sign of a negative 96 is going to be a positive 96. So we're just going to go ahead and add that to both sides of the equation. So we'll start off with the original, negative 96 plus X. Leave a little bit of space, and negative 28. So that's the original equation. And now we're going to want to eliminate the negative 96 by adding a positive 96 to both sides. And then therefore on the left, the negative 96 and the positive 96 simplify out, and we're left with simply X. And on the right hand side, all we need to do is simplify negative 28 plus 96. Now here's a cool little trick. Since addition is commutative, meaning the order doesn't matter, and we have addition on the right hand side, we could go ahead and swap the order. So negative 28 plus 96, that's the same thing as 96 plus a negative 28. However, we can rewrite this addition of a negative value simply as subtraction. So ideally, we have X is equal to 96 minus 28, where plus a negative is the same thing as simply subtraction. So that's a cool little trick. And we'll go ahead and do this off to the side of scratch word. So we'll have 96 minus 28. So we're going to do 6 minus 8. Since 6 is smaller than 8, we have to borrow from the 9 next door. So the 9 becomes an 8. and our 6 becomes a 16. So then 16 minus 8 gives us 8, and then 8 minus 2 gives us 6. So then we have x equals 68. So now that we have the value of x, let us go ahead and state our conclusion clearly. Since the question was how many millions of dollars did the new supplier increase its annual sales by in 1 year, we're going to go ahead and state our conclusion as the new supplier increased its annual sales by $68 million in 1 year. Again, it's simply the question reworded in the form of a statement. So now let us go ahead and move on to the final step in our strategy for problem solving, which is check the result. Again, when checking the result, you want to start off with the original equation found in step 3. So we'll have negative 96 plus x is equal to negative 28. But we already know the value of x, so we're just going to go ahead and substitute that in. Negative 96 plus 68 equals negative 28. On the right hand side, the negative 28, it's already simplified. We can't do anything to it since we're not adding, subtracting, nor multiplying, or dividing anything by it. So we'll go ahead and bring that down. And on the left hand side, we have to simplify this portion of it. So now we're going to go ahead and use what's called the subtraction rule. So we're going to take into consideration the absolute value of negative 96 and the absolute value of 68. So let's see. The absolute value of negative 96, well, the absolute value represents a number's distance from 0. So negative 96 is 96 units away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 96 is 96. And then also the absolute value of 68 is going to be 68, since 68 is 68 units away from 0. So now the bigger of the two is definitely the 96. So we're going to go ahead and carry our subtraction by placing the 96 above and the 68 below. And then keep in mind that the 96 in the original problem was negative. So now we're going to go ahead and subtract these two values. We'll do 6 minus 8, but we can't do that since the 6 is less than 8. So we have to borrow from the 9 next door, which becomes an 8. And then our 6 becomes a 16. So now we're going to go ahead and do 16 minus 8. That's going to leave us with 8. And then doing 8 minus 6, that's going to leave us with 2. So we're left with a 28. But since the 96 was a negative, this is going to leave us a negative 28. Again, that came from the fact that our original 96 was negative. So therefore, we're going to have a negative 28 on the left. And now the question is the left side equal to the right side? Negative 28 is indeed equal to negative 28. So our solution is correct.